So technology is shaping culture, as we also see here. I will handle the normal microphone, I guess. I want to talk about some insights of my research on communities and try to translate my sociological insights into practice. So I'm very excited to discuss this here on a developer conference. And against the backdrop of geopolitical changes, I think it's even more important to think about how we shape software and how we shape communities which shape software. About me, I'm Guagnin. I'm doing research on digitization or socio-technical infrastructures, as we sociologists call it, since 2010. I'm also doing projects on user participation in technology design. I'm working at Nexus Institute as head of area network and society, and also teaching participatory design. So the motivation for my research was to think about the promise of software freedom and sovereignty. And from a sociological point of view, it's very important to think about how software design affects society in general. And going deeper into the topics of sociology, we come to the point where we find that science and technology together is shaped by social order, and that's why it's important to think about communities. And then after this, I will shortly go into my case study on Linux distributions and will show how their culture and technology are built of reciprocity, and come to conclusions afterwards to participation and inclusion in technology. So we had a great opening today from the census and from the question of digital sovereignty. And I also want to stress the point that it's important that we have the freedom to shape software and that's in a general interest, that we need some independence from company leaders who are sometimes getting crazy. We need independence from government regimes changes, and software has become an essential infrastructure. And we also need to talk about that it's not free as in free beer. And in the light of the discussed regime changes, it's very frightening or concerning that the European Commission seems to cut funding for free and open source software. So why is software design so important? Let me draw or make a sociological argument. The whole world is behind user interfaces, and we have no world without nudging. Every user interface selects information, it sanctionizes or incentivizes options to act, for instance, through colors, green or red. It provides a withdraws options to act. Okay, we could call this hard nudging, like buttons or no buttons. And it even enforces actions you have to take. So software shapes our intentions and our possibilities. And it's not only on the interface, on the surface, it's also in the decision architectures, in the data flows, in the storage. We have to keep this in mind, that socio-technical digital infrastructure is always politics. And from a more computer science point of view, it's important to have in mind that the world as we see it is influenced through software, but software also is influenced by people who design it, because everyone who's part of the developing community has an idea of the problems and brings in his views and his perspectives. So we make up models of the world with implicit and explicit assumptions about the world and about the solution. And this is more and more, step by step, put into policies, into protocols, into code snippets, into libraries. So systems are formed which inform the world in the end. So we have implicit and explicit assumptions, and these materialize in software. So this is the reciprocity of culture and technology in very short, and now I want to go into my research on Linux communities. Why did I choose Linux distribution communities? Because They are quite comparable. These are projects with similar tasks and goals and scope, which is to select and pre-configure upstream FLOSS projects mainly. Then these are comparable products. So you have standard management tools like an installing routine, for instance. You have pre-installed apps selected, and you have a pre-configuration. And what I found quite interesting, you have Linux distributions with clear visions, norms, and values. I took some cases which focus more on geek or on noobs as users, and this is also the interesting part for the question of inclusion into communities. The three cases I did research on was Ubuntu, which started with the slogan Linux for human beings on the one side of the scale, and on the other side of the scale we have a KISS, Keep It Simple Stupid distribution, Arch Linux, which is a simple, lightweight distribution, and somewhere in the middle is Debian maybe. Yes, my research is back some years, but the interesting insights I want to share are still valid and important. Some details in the communities might have changed, but yeah, the structural and theoretical insights are the messages I want to talk about. And I also will mainly highlight some remarkable details to illustrate the tendencies. I will mainly draw on the interviews, because in the world of sociology sometimes it's more important what people describe than what is really written in the documents, even if that's most of the time very close to each other. So when we go into the sociology of science and technology, we can say that social order informs the knowledge production, and science and technology is always or often taken together because technology is based on scientific insights. So especially open source or software is also a kind of knowledge. And when we look at the social order of knowledge and software production, we have mainly two dimensions, namely the membership. So we can ask who is conceived as part of the community. We have informal and formal memberships and roles, and different requirements attached to these roles. And then on the other side, we have contributions. So more the technical dimension is the question, what problem areas are addressed in the community, which contributions are considered valid and valuable, which kind of code, for instance, and documentation is valid, and who contributes what. And above this, we have an organizational governance, an organizational structure, which is a kind of temporal dimension, because it's a structure which is designed to define criteria for selecting knowledge, defining membership roles, and competencies that are relevant. And now I will take these three dimensions and go through the three communities to show a bit different tech cultures in the communities. If we look at membership, it's quite interesting that in the Arch community there's the Arch user repository, which is mainly making packages. So here you already have a strong framing that users are package maintainers, and also the class of maintainers are called trusted users, because they have the trust from the developer, from the core developers. In Debian, it's quite interesting that you have a very formalized process of becoming developer, and developer was for a long time the main membership role. Since 2010, you also have the possibility to become Debian developer non-uploading, which also acknowledges contributions which are not code, or which are not maintenance of packages. And it was also, from the beginning, from Debian, it was very important to have a formalized procedure to make it transparent and visible who can become a developer, who can become a developer and who has a vote. And in Ubuntu, I found it quite interesting that from the beginning, Ubuntu members could be members without the need to technically contribute. So we have a quite different framing of the question of membership here. Different levels of entry for the assignment of member roles. We have different requirements of expertise expected from people becoming part of the community. And if we look at contributions, of course, all those levels we have in every community, everyone has code and bug reports and documentation and user support. But as told in ARC, we have a focus on user repositories, and we have a thorough documentation which is used by a lot of people. So this is very brilliant and accurate. In Debian, as mentioned, strong contributions to documentation also can qualify for developers or for the developer status. But again, very interesting looking at Ubuntu, there were a lot of discussion of low-level contributions or low expertise level contributions, like paper-cut bugs, a class of bugs which is very similar to solve or quite easy to solve for people who come new into the community. Then we have bug triaging, and it was also discussed about user experience feedback as a valid contribution, and even advocacy is very much valued. So we see a different evaluation and recognition of kinds of contributions here. And now we come to the governance structures. It's interesting that in ARC you have mainly the core developers taking strategic decisions based on a common sense. And in Debian you have a more formalized roles and entities. I mean, it's also a much huger community, so you need respective structures in place. And then you have, like in many other projects, a technical committee for technical issues. But very interesting, I find, is the General Assembly, that any developer can have a vote in non-technical discussions if the General Assembly comes together. And in Ubuntu, in addition to a technical board and a leader, which is here the founder and long-time sponsor, there's a community council. So you have a dedicated structure to handle community issues. You have, as mentioned, specific non-developer roles, and you have regular public online meetups, which gives a kind of platform for participation and transparency. And last but not least, you have resource allocation for staff and UX research, staff also for the community management. So these are parts which sometimes are not so in line with development activities. So now let me shortly summarize the community cultures in short quotes. Please take it with a grain of salt. I'm trying to make clear the differences. I also had a look on the mailing lists, on the developer lists and the user mailing lists. And in ARC, I found the saying RTFM helps the noob, which very well shows that it's expected that you read manuals and that you find it for yourself. And it's no harm to tell someone to read the manual. In Debian, one Debian project leader once said, when the code is public, RTFM is the proper answer. You could add documented properly afterwards. So the expectation is that if you don't know how it works, you can just find it out and write it down. And in an Ubuntu mailing list, I found a discussion about RTFM, where they said RTFM is not cool, nor following the code of conduct. So there's a very focus on being inclusive and keeping people and empowering also less experienced users. So this, in a nutshell, in a way, I think can summarize the tech culture. What are the expected levels of knowledge for contributions? What are the expected knowledge for active members and users, as I outlined along the 3 dimensions? And also, what are the priorities in the different organization structures? And then I had a look on a piece of software to see how this takes effect. And if we look at the installing software, the install routine was in Arch, just a command line that time, and it was also a decision to get people to really do the installation on their own, to understand what's happening. And then afterwards, if you have problems, if something breaks, you know what the system is consisting of. That's on the one side of the scale. On the other side of the scale, you have the Ubuntu installer, who even told users to plug in the power source and to get an internet connection. So this is a very low level, very inclusive. And on the other side, you just need to learn how the system works. And in between, somewhere is the Debian installer, which has also a nice interface, but has a very linear process. And the Ubuntu installer is hiding more complexity. So here we see that the software, in a way, is in line with the community culture of how people think people should understand their system. And at the same time, the software, again, works as a selector for new users. So people who are not capable of using a command line might not use Arc. Of course, in the meantime, they again have an easier installer, but I also wanted to make sure the edges of the scale. So, what can we learn? What's the matter with organizational structures? We could see there's a strong, the member selection is part of the organizational structure. The structures, DST evaluation of contributions, like task definitions, roles and rights, access rights. Then it structures how strategic decisions are made, and structures of the community consolidate priorities. But they also can facilitate change. So the structure can be challenged if it's foreseen in the structure somehow. And we saw that it's not just the organization, also the software as an outcome attracts or rejects certain kinds of users and potential members. But also an interesting finding is that the freedom to fork limits organization power. So the option to fork gives incentives to take into account multiple views. And forks can follow different paths. So you can see here how free software enables a total regime change somehow if the community decides to follow another path as the organization does. So let me draw some conclusions to opportunities for inclusivity. We saw that user roles differ in requirements and rights. So user empowerment is also a matter of organizational roles, of organizational structures. Non-developers may play a role which have an impact on software. Then communication is challenging, diversity even more, so it's more easy in a homogeneous small group. And if you have a bigger group or a more diverse group, it's more important to have a look on community management and also allocate resources for this or structures dedicated to it, like a community council. And then going beyond scratching your own itch can be facilitated by allocating additional resources if available. So it's important to take into account also user experience research and staff for community management. This doesn't necessarily fit to any kind of software, but for the software which has a strong need of users, this is the case, as we also heard in the opening keynote, that end user software also needs to be usable. And now I'm coming more to the end. It's not just Linux and GNU Linux, it's more importantly, generally important to have socio-technical infrastructures as a freedom infrastructure. Information and communication technology, if we think of the term, it's just very important and have become very important. We need independence from geopolitical changes, and we need the possibility to change basic functionality and not be too dependent on one single company, for instance. We need control of data flows and foster technical accountability, and the free software structure is, in a way, for public interest instead of profit maximization regarding social technical infrastructures is very important. So we again have the crazy CEO here, and ActivityPub as one important information structure we face today, since in a democracy, the discussion space and the space for public discourse has become very essential and important. So let me conclude with putting the saying around and saying, make FOSS great again. Closed garden has spread, but from the beginning, the internet was based very much on FOSS. It's concerning that we see governmental funding being cut, 27 million budget in the Horizon program, Alexander Sander told last year. But we need funding to make a sustainable, secure, and inclusive software for society. So I put here a link. The European Commission is at the moment has open a consultation. So if you also find we need funding for specific tasks and specific software design, you can leave a consultation there. So that's it. We have 5 minutes for discussion, or 4. Thank you for listening, and thanks for having me here.
You mentioned that open source software is able to be forked if there's major disagreements between some of the community and the organization that's running the software. However, I don't really see that happening very often. Is there anything that you can think of that would make it easier to fork things and to have these like kind of splits, or is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, in general, it's a high cost also for community to have a fork, because you're always losing women and manpower. So I remember one example during my research was when in Ubuntu they put the Amazon search in the dashboard, and then the French community just changed totally. They just took out the Amazon search. So this works and happens, but also in this moment it was just a signal to the bigger, or to the whole Ubuntu community, and then they changed also the dashboard. So I would say it's not a goal we want to achieve to have more forks. It's more kind of sanitizing mechanism that you have the opportunity to fork, and that puts some pressure to find a common sense how to build it.
Thanks for answering that question. I want to dig a little deeper. So I forked a project And it's over 7 years later, and there is still particularly bad blood from the other side, and it's unclear how to resolve it. And it's gotten so bad that the whole IETF working group has suffered as well. So how do you resolve these things? I feel like we did something good and we're technically better and we've improved the UX, but there's this huge rift now.
Hard to say something general about it, but I'm always optimistic and think you can find maybe common interests. I mean, probably it's very hard to get a common path after breaking. Sometimes maybe it's fine if there's some time in between and you can resettle, and sometimes it also needs that some people change. But I think it would be useful and helpful to try to find common senses. Or what we also sometimes observe is that you split parts where you can work together and others where you follow different paths. Maybe we can discuss also later. It sounds very interesting.
So you feel like there would be an optimal solution for your case?
Can you wait for the mic?
Oh, yeah. I just want to ask you a question. Do you feel like there is an optimal solution or a desirable solution for your case specifically? What would be the solution of your dreams for your case?
Oh, the solution of my dreams. I mean, it'd be nice to find consensus, but I think at the same time, when you have different parties and they realize, okay, that we're pursuing different goals, then you have to be able to separate and still sort of say, okay, I respect you, you're pursuing this vision, I'm pursuing this vision, and that's okay. And I think one of the problems in my particular case is there's a feeling of how could you possibly not respect my vision because that's the right vision. I mean, obviously that's my take on it, right? The other person has a very different view of the situation. I don't know.
Do you feel like it would help if there would be, let's say, FOSS mediators, people who are very understanding of the meta inner workings of free software, and they act within communities who have forked to create those conversations and build those bridges? Do you feel like you need a third party to be involved? Would it be helpful for you?
I'm going to say definitely external help in lots of different ways would be useful, because I think a lot of people in the free software community tend to, let me say, be on the autistic spectrum and not have perhaps as much empathy or understanding or time. I don't know. I fall down that myself as well sometimes and try to catch myself. But I'm happy to take this offline, and I don't want to take time away from your presentation anymore. Sorry.
I'm asking this specifically because it's a subject of cybernetics and systems theory, something that I've been studying for a couple of years. And I've been seeing this tendency in tech as a whole that we are over-specializing in fields, and we are moving away from generalized approaches and transdisciplinary solutions. So I think cybernetics and systems theory could help in that regard, and in many regards also in the study of governance. The question that I have for you is, from your assessment, I'm not sure if this is within scope of your study, did you see the culture you have investigated being influential in the participation of Global South contributors? Do you feel like, for example, in Arch Linux, less Global South people would participate in Arch, but more Global South people would participate in Ubuntu, for example?
No, I didn't look at this kind. You mean Google developers in the community, or what? Google Soft? I didn't understand.
Contributors as a whole.
Okay, contributors as a whole. No, didn't have a look on this. I think we don't have time, but I stay here for a couple of minutes so we can keep discussing. Thanks for the questions. Also, the social part in communities is very important. So let's have an eye on that, and not only on online discussions, but also on meetings like this here. And yeah, thanks for the discussion.
Thank you, Daniel.